Hello, welcome to Simple Science that you can do at home, and today we are learning about density. You may be asking yourself, what exactly is density? Honestly, density is kind of like mass. Now you may be asking yourself, what is mass? Well, honestly, mass is kind of like, but not really like weight. You may be asking yourself, what is weight? Oh my goodness, we're going down a rabbit hole. So let's start talking about this stuff. When we talk about mass, we often talk about mass in terms of weight. It's like how heavy something is, but that's not exactly right. Mass is different than weight. Weight is determined by gravity, and mass is determined by how much matter or stuff is in an object. So let's break that down just a little bit. So if mass is determined by how much stuff is in an object, that stuff is actually matter. Matter makes up everything. Everything around you. You can look or you can feel yourself. Anything in the world that is solid, liquid, gas is made up of matter. So how much stuff is in an object, that equals the mass. The more matter in an object, the more the mass. The less matter, the less the mass. To help explain this, I have a diagram. Now this diagram is really simple. It just simply shows two objects. One has more mass because it has more things in it. One has less mass because it has less things in it. But this starts getting a little bit more complex when we compare mass and weight. Now weight is what we often think of as mass, but it's not really, because weight changes by the amount of gravity that is being pulled on an object. And right now you may be thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I have another diagram to try to explain this. But before I show you this diagram, let's look at a video of astronauts walking across the moon. Did I say walking? I must have meant falling. It would be super hard to walk on the moon because there's a lot less gravity. The moon's surface gravity is weaker because it's a lot less massive than Earth. And since the Earth and the moon are different sizes and have different mass, the moon's gravity is less. Now, if you look at those astronauts falling on the moon, they fell at a lot slower rate than you would have fell on Earth because the gravity is less. It's almost like they're floating just a little bit. Weight is determined by gravity. So, if we have the same person standing on the Earth or standing on the moon, their weight will change. This person may weigh 150 pounds on the Earth, but because there is less gravity on the moon they only weigh about 25 pounds. However, the mass is exactly the same because the mass isn't anything to do with gravity. It's just how much matter is in an object. So if the person's mass is 70 kilograms on the Earth, it is also 70 kilograms on the moon. So now let's bring that back to density, because today we're talking about density in liquid. Now density is the same as mass. It's how much matter is in the liquids that we're looking at. And today's simple science experiment is as simple as pouring things into a glass, but it's a great way to show different densities of different liquids. So some of the materials you may need are some different liquids from your kitchen. I've got several here. I've got some oil, I've got some syrup, some honey, some soap. You're also going to need a glass, something clear, and so you can see the liquid within it. You may also need some food coloring, just in case some of your liquids are all the same color. But for this experiment, we will be looking at the different densities of these different liquids. Which one has more matter, which one has less. And in order to do that, all we have to do is pour. So with this experiment, I've got all my things set out. I've got 5 different liquids and I've got my glass. Now this can get kind of messy, so I like to set out a towel before I do it. I'm gonna start with what I think is the most dense liquid, or the liquid with the most mass. For me, I think it's the honey. So I'm gonna start by pouring the honey. Now you don't have to have a lot. As a matter of fact, you can just use a little bit on the bottom. Next, I'm gonna go with the liquid that I think is the closest to the density of the honey, and I think that's gonna be the syrup, or the corn syrup. And I'm gonna pour it in really slowly. What are some things that you're observing right here? Now let's think about this a little bit. We've got the honey and we've got the corn syrup, but look how it's looking inside the glass. Another thing that's really awesome about this experiment is you can add things on the fly. So I decided just to add some milk in there too, just for fun, to see what happens. Ooh, I made a mess with that one, but it looks really cool. Right, now let's add some dish soap. Remember, sometimes you need to pour really slowly. I'm going to try to pour this as slow as possible. Next, this could get a little bit messy. I'm going to pour a little bit of water. Now, I've dyed my water blue so it's easier to see. And last, I'm going to pour in the oil. So right now we've got this really weird mixture of liquids. I'm gonna let it sit just a little bit and come back. As you can see, they're already starting to separate. So we'll come back to this in just about 10 minutes. 10 minutes has passed and now we can look at the different liquids within our glass. If I let them sit a little longer, they may actually separate a little bit more. However, I wanted to get right to it, talk about a few things that we notice. On the bottom, we have our honey, our syrup, and our milk. If we notice that the density of those liquids are different enough that there's a clear space where one liquid stops and one begins. Towards the middle, we have our milk, our soap, and our water. Now, those liquids are pretty close in density, and so while they are separated, the milk's obviously on the bottom, the soap's in the middle, and the water's up the top, there is a little bit of blending going on there. There's not such a clear, hard line of separation. Of course, our least dense liquid would be our oil, and it is sitting on top. Look at it all together, we have a clear representation of the different densities of liquids. The most dense are on the bottom, and the least dense liquids are on the top. That's pretty amazing. There you have it, a really brief lesson on density, mass, gravity, and matter. Holy cow, we covered a lot today, but my challenge to you is this. With your parents' permission, find different liquids in your house, pour them in a glass, and find out the densities of those different liquids. Remember, the ones that are most dense settle to the bottom, and the least dense float to the top. Now go out there and have fun and ask questions.